to be who you are and do what you do. To be who you are and do what you do. How do you make decisions? How do you decide to be who you are and do what you do? To be who you are and do what you do. To be who you are and do what you do. 'Cause what you do inspires me to be who I am and to do what I do the best that I can, just like you do. To be who I am and to do what I do the best that I can, just like you do. What's your inspiration? What inspires you? To be who you are and do what you do. To be who you are and do what you do. To be who you are and do what you do. 'Cause what you do inspires me to be who I am and to do what I do the best that I can, just like you do. Be who I am and to do what I do the best that I can, just like you do.
Welcome. I just love that song. And that was Vermont's own Mr. Chris, who is such a treasure for Vermont's little ones and their grown-ups. And he was delighted to be here that we'd be opening tonight's session with it. So I'm Janet McLaughlin, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. And I'm delighted to welcome you to the third and final segment of the 2021 Vermont Early Childhood Education Conference. We're excited to have over 100 people here with us this evening, and we have a timely and important program planned. Kheya Ganguly, Vermont's Director of Trauma Prevention and Resilience Development, is with us, and we know that as early childhood educators and other early childhood professionals, you have been working hard under truly challenging circumstances for not only the last 18 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also for many of you for years and years. You have already demonstrated remarkable resilience, and yet the last year and a half has still been especially challenging. Christina Goodwin, the president-elect of Vermont AUIC and the executive director of Pine Forest Children's Center, reflected on this recently, and I wanted to share her powerful words to kick us off tonight. We dressed up yesterday in costume with the children at school. We were Julie and Christina, the early childhood educators. Our costumes reminded us that even though we are more worried, stressed, scared, and overwhelmed than ever before, we can do it. We can pivot yet again to think about wellness, the future, the light at the end of the tunnel. We can stop all the busy work and play and be together with the children. We can dream of how we want this world to be. We can remember all the trailblazing women before us who created a world where we can work. We can be businesswomen. We can succeed, dream, and plan. We can remember that our life's work and passion means other women in our community can pursue their passion and blaze their own trail. We know that we need to keep moving forward day by day as we create an early childhood education ecosystem that supports well-compensated, well-prepared early childhood educators to provide learning experiences for young children during their most crucial developmental years in ways that support the whole family. The path right now shows that we need to nurture, cultivate, love, respect, and honor all the people doing this hard work, to build them up, provide them with wellness supports, and give them breathing space to grow. Much like the trailblazing women of World War II and Rosie the Riveter, we are leading the way for reimagining the ECE ecosystem. It can't stay this way. It's time to unwind and reimagine the possibilities, hopes, and needs. We can do it, we need to do it, and we will do it. So many thanks to Christina for letting me share her words, and to Christina and Julie for letting me share their picture. I thought this was such a great example of how support from our colleagues can build resilience. And of course, we know that support from our communities and its leaders are important ingredients in our resilience too. So tonight, we'll start with brief remarks from our elected officials here in Vermont, and then we'll welcome leaders from Vermont Head Start to kick off this important discussion on resilience in early childhood education. So let's start with hearing from, first, the Speaker of the Vermont House, Jill Krowinski. Next, we'll hear from Vermont Senate Pro Tem, Becca Balint. And third, we'll hear from Governor Scott.
It's wonderful to be part of this year's virtual Early Childhood Education Conference. All of you are incredible in the dedication and care you provide our young Vermont children each and every day. Having settings for children that are focused on high quality care and education has and will continue to set children up for success and will have ripple effects for years to come. This has been a tremendously difficult year for all of us, and I know we are exhausted from this pandemic, but we have and we will continue to get through this together. Early childhood educators have absolutely been critical in Vermont's success during this pandemic, and the collaboration and creative thinking that you have undertook to make this work has been truly inspirational. I know that the recent surge in cases in our communities has been an incredible strain on all of you with staffing shortages, parents pleading for more coverage, and the looming uncertainty of when there will be a decrease in cases. We have took some steps this past session to support the work you all do, but we have much more work to do to provide you as educators and for working families that are in need of high quality care and education you provide. Earlier this year, Senator Becca Balint and I had the chance to meet with a group of early educators to discuss the challenges and possibilities for change as we begin to work to recover from the pandemic. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to this group, but the ideas flowed and flowed. A list of investment opportunities and policy changes followed. It included paying providers for their time to take the mandatory professional development needed, build off legislation passed this last year and continue to fund loan repayment and tuition reimbursement opportunities, create better connections with high school students to increase pathways into the early education field, and look at ways to decrease the administrative burden on providers so there's less paperwork and more time with children. There were many more ideas, but the bottom line is to make sure that we have a stable system where providers feel supported and children have access to high quality care and parents have peace of mind that their young ones are in the skilled hands of early education experts. This will be an ongoing effort, and we will have to evaluate what we can do in the short, medium, and long term. I want you all to know that this is something that I have long been passionate about, and that you have an ally and a supporter in creating a better system. Many of us have known for a long time that early education is in many ways the backbone of our economy, and without it, we are destined to fail. The pandemic has highlighted this case for those who did not see how important this system is and the powerful role that it plays in our society and our communities. I want to keep the momentum going and make sure we do not lose this moment to make changes that will improve the lives of our Vermont children, support our early educators, and be a tremendous asset for working families across the state. Again, you have all been so inspirational in how you have stepped up, and I know that it is and continues to be stressful in this work, but I want to reiterate a message of hope and know that I will be fighting on your behalf to provide relief and stability to all of you. Thank you so much for all you do. Please be well and stay safe.
Hello, I'm Becca Ballant, Windham County Senator and President Pro Tem of the Senate. And I'm very happy to say a few words this morning to Vermont's early childhood educators. Before I was in politics, I was a history teacher, although I taught older students and community college students too. By far, my favorite age was the middle school years. I love middle schoolers because they're spicy and they're goofy and they're rough around the edges and they're fiercely trying to figure out who they are and who they want to be in the world. And every year at parent-teacher conferences, parents would come in and say to me, I don't know why you want to hang out with my middle schooler, but I'm so glad you do. And I taught at 4 different K-8 schools here in Vermont, and I heard similar things from my colleagues in each school. Often elementary school teachers were really confounded by why I'd want to teach middle schoolers, who they saw as difficult and smelly and mouthy and dealing with raging hormones. And I always laughed and I'd said, I'd much rather deal with middle schoolers than pre-K students. And the truth is, whenever we do mixed age groups, pairing up the pre-K and the kindergartners with my 7th and 8th graders, I really couldn't understand what the little kids were saying most of the time. They always seemed to be speaking a totally different language. And I spent years on the school board of my kids' preschool in Brattleboro and would come in to do music with them each week. And I'd bring my guitar and my songbooks. And whenever I'd walk in, the kids would call out, Abe's mom is here, rock star mom is here. It was a wonderful greeting and I definitely felt loved and appreciated, but I couldn't have been successful at sharing music with these children without all of the professionals in the room. The work of early childhood education is some of the most important work in Vermont. Your tireless efforts, your professionalism, and your compassion and the support for kids and families are the things that set children up for success later in life. The research is clear. We know how critically important early childhood education is to our children, but we also know it's important for society as a whole. And I know you all face many challenges. Your work is often misunderstood by others and sometimes dismissed as, oh, they get paid to play with kids all day. And every time I hear this, it makes me cringe. You are skilled, hardworking professionals, and your work is the foundation on which all other educational goals rest. Let's also name a few elephants in the room. You're not paid enough. You may come to work with educational debt. You're overworked and your childcare centers are understaffed. We have a serious workforce shortage throughout the state. And this is creating anxiety for all of you and for the families you serve. And this makes your work even more challenging. And on a personal level, I just want to say, I know I couldn't do the work that you do. And I'm so grateful to all of you. The Speaker of the House and I and our colleagues in both in the House and the Senate are absolutely committed to making sure that we support early childhood educators in the upcoming session, like we have in previous sessions. We need to invest in those professionals who are making life better for Vermont's families. Thank you.
Good evening, and thanks for inviting me to the Early Childhood Education Conference. I really appreciate events like these. because I know how much they benefit our kids by giving educators and administrators more tools to serve them and finding new ways to work together. Since I first came to office, my top priority has been to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. And strengthening education from cradle to career is something that checks all three of these boxes. A safe, healthy, and high-quality education system leads to well-rounded kids, who then go on to contribute to our communities. And we know having the best education system in the country can be the best tool for attracting the young working families we desperately need for a stronger economy. This is why I prioritize investments in cradle to career, starting with a record amount for early care and learning, because I believe it's critical for our kids to have a good foundation and will benefit them throughout their lives. Unfortunately, as you know all too well, our kids have suffered greatly due to the pandemic. The isolation and fear surrounding COVID has been incredibly harmful to their mental health, and like you, I'm concerned. The good news is we know children are resilient, which is why it's fitting the theme of this conference is resilience, because it's exactly the focus we need. And I want to thank you for all you're doing to help our kids recover from the pandemic. It's going to take all of us pulling in the same direction and serving as role models to get them back on track. But I'm confident if we stay focused on their well-being, we can help them get to the other side and make our system even stronger for years to come. There's still much more work to do to not only support our kids, but also to achieve my vision for the best cradle-to-career education system in the country. But each and every one of you has and will continue to play a critical role in getting there. So I appreciate all you do. I know your work can be thankless at times, but it doesn't go unnoticed, at least not by me. I look forward to seeing you all in person sometime very soon.
Okay. So I hope that you can hear and see that Vermont's elected officials have early childhood education and the essential role of early childhood educators top of mind. And they also need to continue to hear from all of you about the solutions to the problems that are impacting kids, families, and educators every day. So I hope you will be in touch with them, and as Vermont AEYC, we will keep in touch with you so that you know what's happening within Vermont state government and where your voices can have the most impact. Because we know that we need immediate action, and we also need to keep thinking systematically and long-term in order to build the dynamic early childhood education profession that we need here in Vermont. So as we get started, I do want to offer a word of gratitude to our sponsors. Each of these sponsors has invested in this conference in recognition of the essential work of Vermont's early childhood educators, and we're thankful for their support. If you connect with them, please thank them for helping make this conference possible. We are also very grateful to members of our conference planning committee who were from the Vermont Head Start Association, the Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office, Let's Grow Kids, Northern Lights at CCV, the Vermont Child Care Providers Association, and of course, members of the staff and board of Vermont AEYC. We are especially grateful to Vermont's Head Start community for taking the lead on tonight's session and tomorrow's workshops. And taken together, we hope this section of the conference provides you with new information and ideas and strategies that support you in cultivating resilience in yourself and in everyone around you. So here's the plan. Next up, I'll introduce Betsy Raspin-Gunn, the Director of Early Childhood Services at the United Counseling Services in Bennington and co-chair of the Vermont Head Start Association. Betsy will turn it over to Renee Kelly, the director of Vermont's Head Start Collaboration Office. And from there, we'll be off to the races with our keynote speaker, Kheya Ganguly, and then a panel of Vermont early childhood professionals. We will have some time for Q&A near the end of the session, so please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. So that's the plan. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. And with that, I'm honored to welcome Betsy Rathbun-Gunn. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet. And it will be an absolutely wonderful evening tonight. And I'm so glad that so many people have been able to join us. You know, I've been part of this field for over 35 years, and I know that the last year has been challenging and extraordinary. But I've also been so honored and so proud of the work that we do and how we've been able to continue to care and educate our children, take care of our families, and really, really help our communities. So I'd like to add my thanks to all the thanks that you just heard to everybody in the field, because I want to say thank you. Thank you for your compassion. This has been so difficult. So many days that we've had lack of staffing or difficult decisions to make, but everybody I know leads with their heart and has great compassion. I want to say thank you to all of you for the respect you've given each other and to the field. It really has been absolutely amazing. And I know that we've had to persevere, and we've had to persevere in lots of different ways. Teachers have had to do sessions online. We have learned new ways of being able to communicate. Even tonight is one of those examples. So again, I just want to extend my thanks to all of you. And I'm so proud of the work that Head Start and Early Head Start does for over 1,400 children in our communities, and our ways of serving those children through all of our wonderful partners. So thank you to all of you too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Renee, our wonderful Head Start Collaboration Director. Thank you, and everybody enjoy tonight.
Thank you, Betsy, and good evening, everyone. My name is Renee Kelly. I currently serve as the director of the Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office. I had the pleasure to work with Vermont AEYC and the Vermont Head Start Association to bring you tonight's content, which I am very excited about. We know that this is timely content, this is timely information, and so we hope that, as Janet referenced, you'll walk away from tonight with some new strategies that you can employ to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because we need you to take care of yourself so you can help take care of Vermont kids and families. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce our keynote speaker, Kheya Ganguly. Kheya brings a wealth of personal and professional experience to our table. She's currently the Director of Trauma Prevention and Resilience Development for the State of Vermont and is based out of the Department of Mental Health. Kheya began her career working as a child care resource and referral specialist. She's worked for nonprofits, colleges, school systems, and designated mental health agencies. She's an experienced teacher and trainer and has worked with all age groups. She's created curriculum for teachers, parents, medical and education professionals, and courses for both undergraduate and graduate students. Kheya is a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as creating locally sourced food systems, social justice, professional ethics, and women's studies. Kheya has a solid background in collaborative consultation and coaching and excels at building consensus. She also has experience in higher education, working as a writing tutor, academic advisor, and admissions advisor, as well as experiencing teaching undergraduate courses in counseling and human development. Kheya is a graduate of NVU Johnson with a bachelor's in psychology and the University of South Florida with a master's in social psychology and curriculum and instruction. She is the recipient of an ALANA award recognizing excellence as a minority student and a USF University Fellowship for academic achievement. Her work and research interests include trauma and resilience, human sexuality, psychology, women's studies, and race and culture. Born in India and raised in both India and the United States, she has traveled extensively over the world. She also speaks Bengali and English. So with that, I will turn it over to Kheya. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate you being here. I'm really looking forward to this presentation and the workshops tomorrow. So the one warning or caveat I'm going to give you when I get started is I'm going to go through a lot of information in a very short time tonight. So I'm probably going to make your brains hurt. Please, as questions arise, put them in the Q&A so we can answer them. I don't want you to forget something that may come up. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And good. And just bear with me while I do this. Okay, here we go. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to talk about resilience in Vermont, resilience with people we work with, and especially resilience for ourselves, and how to manage the stress and all the other things that we've been dealing with and we do deal with on a regular basis. So what is resilience? It's the capacity to thrive, whether it's individually or collectively as a community, in the face of adversity. And really what that means is when things go wrong, we have the ability to bounce back. And it does not assume that you do this on your own. It does assume that support comes from a variety of places. So the one thing I want you to remember while we're talking about resilience and trauma and all of the things connected is that there are 8 different dimensions of wellness. And part of the thing that we need to know is that we can be well in certain areas of our life, but not well in others. And we can have strengths in some areas and challenges in others. And we can use the strengths that we have to work on areas where we may face challenges. So one of the tasks that I assign people a lot, or I used to when I was practicing as a mental health professional, is I take this dimensions of wellness and take the titles and tell people part of being well is setting yourself goals. And they don't have to be large ones. They can be small goals under each of the areas. Because the more you grow, the more resilience you'll develop and the better you'll feel overall. So how is Vermont working towards all of us being resilient? So we're trying to create an integrated statewide system where we can all use the resources that we need to thrive. And part of that is really starting to understand where we have strengths and challenges within the state. So that's part of what I'm doing, is sort of passing information on and educating people. Why does it matter? Because we believe, and I very strongly believe, that when we can access the resources that will support our well-being, we will thrive, Vermont will thrive, and the kids we work with will thrive. So why are we prioritizing it? One, it's strengths-based. And I know as early educators, you understand that, is we always want to work from places of strength for people. It's collaborative. Trying to build resilience is not a one-person job. And the closer we work together and the more we work together, the more resilient we become. It's forward thinking. And what that means is this is sort of the cutting edge of research and science. We're really starting to look at how do we build this? Resilience isn't something innate. And it's not something that people just have, including children. It's something we develop and build upon. It doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter where you are in the lifespan, you can always increase it. It's inclusive, because to build resilience, we need to understand ourselves and we need to understand the people we're working with. And when you do that, you have to look at a person as a whole. So you're going to look at their community, their culture, their ethnicity, all of those different pieces, because they may be using those pieces to increase resilience, or they may be an area of challenge. And it's responsive, because as you see people develop the resilience, you're going to keep building upon that and moving forward. So we're going to talk about staff stress and resilience, and we're going to talk about you and some of the things that are going on right now. So let's talk about the past 16 months. We're going to talk about the past 16 months and lifestyle changes and personal challenges and continued fear. I mean, think about it. In the past 16 months, we've dealt with a worldwide pandemic. We've had to have a contested election. We've seen several civil rights movements. We've seen violence. We've seen riots. We've seen more things in a short period of time than I thought we ever would. On top of that, we've had to deal with some pretty severe lifestyle changes. We've gone from being out in the world to having to be into quarantine, and to suddenly figure out, for many people, how to work remotely, or if you were working in person, how to do that and still be safe. For our children, we suddenly became not only mom or teacher, we became an IT specialist. Some of us became physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists. We took on all of these roles all at once while dealing with the personal challenges of, trying to manage a household, being at home, worrying about what was going on, and additional daily life stresses that didn't go away, whether it was starting a new job, losing a job, starting a new relationship, ending one, people in our families or friends that might have passed away, not from COVID, but from just life itself. And then we had those COVID illnesses and losses on top of that. And then we dealt with continued fear, because we were so much on the cutting edge of this pandemic that we never knew what was going to change next. So now that I've depressed everybody, understand that we need to acknowledge that we have all been traumatized, and we have all personally experienced trauma during this period. And it's affected how we look at the world. It's affected how we think about life. And we continue to worry, what's going to be next? So what now? So we're returning to the workplace for those of us who were remote. Vaccinations are an issue. There's lots of facts out about them. I recommend people take a look and, find out what you can do. But one of the things I will say when it comes to stress and trauma and resilience, you are allowed to make choices. So in other words, we may not have a mask mandate, but if it makes you feel better to wear a mask when you go out of the house, then do so. We may not be under quarantine, but if it makes you feel better not to interact with many, many people, that's okay. Whatever choices you make for yourself are the choices you're making for yourself. Above all, allow for grace for yourself and for other people. I'm sure you're finding that you are more hair triggered, that you feel tired. Your thoughts can be cloudy. Other people are going through the same thing. So when you see someone who is not normally snappy, take a deep breath and understand that they're going through the exact same thing you are. So if we're looking at some just overall thoughts I want you to keep in the back of your head as we go through more detail. Part of self-care is being kind to yourself and others. It's seeking out support, whether that be professional through therapy or through friends. It's choosing moments of happiness. We're allowed to be happy. We're allowed to spend time with our families, with our pets, with our friends. The more you choose happiness, the better you actually end up feeling. And allow for adjustments. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's hard for all of us because everyone likes to have some kind of control in their lives. So just know that the more things change, the more they're probably going to. So one of the things that people tell me all the time is I don't have time for self-care. And if someone tells me again to take a bubble bath, I'm going to scream. And I get that. I understand how that feels. So here is my challenge to you. I believe that you can find 2 minutes in your day. If you can find that 2 minutes, here are things that you can do. And some of these are really good in the moment. So if you're in a classroom or you're with a child who is really starting to act out behaviorally and you're sort of at your wit's end, one, I remind people, breathe. And one of the things you can do than just breathe is put your hand on your stomach or on your diaphragm. And while you're breathing, make sure you're pushing out and feel that, because sometimes centering yourself in your body can really help. Invite yourself to stretch and invite people around you to do the same things. Smile at yourself. So if you catch yourself in a mirror, smile. Try to laugh. Ask for help. You know, I know how stressful things are, and I know how challenging the workforce situation is. But if you are in a situation where you are feeling like you are going to break or you are going to have another minute, this is the time to ask for help. It's okay to say no to a new responsibility, like your child, let's say at home, wants to join another sport and they want you to be one of the moms in charge. It's okay to say no. Look out the window for a minute. You know, it's been beautiful this time of year. Spend time with your pet. I just got a new puppy, so I've been running around and having great joy with that. Drink some water. And the other piece is rotate your neck. The minute you get stressed, what I find for a lot of people is they hold stress in their neck and in their shoulders. So shrug your shoulders in circles, rotate your neck a little bit, especially if you're in the classroom and you're feeling like, okay, I'm really on the edge. If you do that, you can feel the muscles relax a little bit, and that can help in the moment. So now you've got 5 minutes. Listen to a song you like. It's okay to cry if you need to cry. Chat with a coworker or a friend. Sing. I don't care how badly you sing. You don't have to sing in front of other people, but sing. Get some fresh air. Make a cup of coffee. Play a game on your phone. Take a couple minutes. It's okay to waste a little time sometimes just to give your brain a break to reset. Okay, so easy things to do. They can be pleasurable, they can be challenging. One of the things I really try to tell people is really try to remember that what works for one person may not work for another. So anything that you can think of that might take 2 minutes, you should do. That's one of the best things, 2 minutes before the kids come in, or kids are eating lunch and you're watching and there's other adults in the room. Take a moment to take that deep breath. So part of building resilience is looking at your programs and building resilience there, because the more things you can do, the better the kids do, which reduces stress on you. So let's talk about being trauma-informed versus trauma-responsive and healing-centered. We do a lot of talk about trauma-informed practices. And to me, trauma-informed for a lot of people is a first step. It's learning the information. It's understanding, what ACEs are, adverse childhood experiences, and where they should be applied and where they shouldn't. It doesn't necessarily obviously speak to application. That's included under it. But one of the language shifts that I really try to use is talking about being trauma responsive and healing centered. That's what we want, whether it's for the kids we work with or whether it's for us. It speaks to applying knowledge you have. And rather than informing, you're trying to transform lives. It doesn't necessarily look at root causes. What we're trying to do is figure out where people are now and meet them there. Because what we really want to do is foster healing and strengthen people as much as possible. One of the things I can say is, we went from, in the older days, what's wrong with you? Then we went to what happened to you. And I urge us to now ask, how can we help you? Because here's the thing to think about. Trauma is intensely personal. And for some people, just talking about the trauma, especially if they're not ready to re-traumatizes them. And assuming that a child or a parent or even you would want to go and meet with someone and immediately lay out, these are all my traumas, is assuming a lot without the ability to have built a relationship and build trust. So before we ask what happened to you, let's really look at what's going on in your life today and how can we help you? Because really understanding what the traumas are don't always lead to interventions. They don't lead to support. What they do is they just give us information. Instead, if we know, let's say we have a kid, they've had some trauma history, we may not be clear, they tend to act out behaviorally, especially when attention's not focused on them. But they love to help. That's one of their strengths. So if we use that strength of helping to make up for that need for attention, because they're going to get some of that attention, but they're also going to be doing something positive and using something they're good at, whether it's helping another student, helping a teacher, or simply helping themselves. So that's the way I like to frame how we want to look at things. So just know that what we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving from that healing centered is holistic. We're going to move from like trying to come up with treatment to engagement, because when people are engaged and they're fully living and enjoying life, they're increasing their resilience. And third, it's understanding a social ecological model. And I'm not going to hurt your brain too much by going over this in a lot of detail. I'm just going to show you this picture. This is actually what Head Start was based off of, which is that a person is surrounded by a series of systems, from something that's super close, like their family, all the way out to social conditions, culture, laws. And all of these things really affect how they interact and move through the world. So we are not living in isolation. We live in connections and interactions with both people and systems around us. So let's talk about where we live today. The continuum for organizations and classroom go from stress-inducing to healing-centered. And a lot of what happens is we live in stress-inducing atmospheres. And when we do, it's places that we lack trust in what's going on. We may feel emotionally, physically, psychologically unsafe. It's a place where things don't flow together well, and it's reactive. Like we're always reacting and even overreacting to crisis. And it's rigid. There isn't a lot of flexibility. Where most of us are right now is we're trauma informed, or we're coming down. We're developing an awareness. We're trying to create a common language and gain knowledge and collaborate so that we can help the people we work with and help ourselves. When we're healing centered, not only do we help kids, we help ourselves, because we're going to value human connections. It's going to be important to us that we connect with those around us. We'll find ourselves in safe spaces where things are predictable. People are honest. We feel joy and build on strength upon strength. We collaborate and we're culturally responsive. So in other words, that doesn't necessarily mean you know everything about every single culture in the world. What it does mean is when you come across something new, you make the effort to learn. So if we want to really some practical things for you in the classrooms, because I know, well, I want to build your stress, I also want to give you some quick, down and dirty, easy things to do when you see kids starting to struggle. So if we're going to go from the bottom up, Using patterned, repetitive activities is comforting, and that goes for you too. It works for adults as much as kids. So it could be rocking back and forth, it could be walking, jumping, petting an animal, singing, dancing, anything that's sort of rhythmic and repetitive. So these are things you could build into your day, just as for everybody, because you know it's going to help everybody. And if you're leading this, you're going to be doing the same thing. And it will actually help calm down your nervous system as much as the kids you work with. So if you're going to go from the top down, which is using your brain, think of people who are grounders. And what does that mean? If there are people who you just see are very calm, whether it's a friend, a kid, see what they're doing. Sometimes connecting a grounder with someone who is having a stressful moment can really be centering. Map out solutions for yourself. And that really means if you need to do a pro and con list on paper, you should do it. For kids at this point, while we want to encourage independence and let them start thinking, we may have to do a little more leading. Because one of the things to remember when we're thinking about their development, and a top-down approach right now, they've lost about 18 months in way of emotional and social emotional growth. So a child that you may have that is in a let's say 4 or 5 year old classroom, or is in kindergarten, is probably in a lot of ways going to be acting about a year to a year and a half behind themselves socially, emotionally. So that 5-year-old is acting more like a 3.5 or 4-year-old. So you're seeing more outbursts because you may not have adjusted your expectations to where their behavior is. So remember that, for your own sake and for your frustration's sake, when you start seeing some behaviors coming out, one of the questions to ask yourself is this a place where we need to do some extra support and skill building so they gain those skills? Use affirmations, use them with your kid. And for you, listen to your self-talk. I think it's very hard for us right now to say positive things. And I think the more negative things you repeat to yourself, the more you are actually programming your brain. Because if you look at our brains, we're human animals and we were created to survive. So our brains tend to hold on to bad things a lot easier than things that are positive. So one of the things I used to tell people when I was teaching, especially for teachers in the classroom, every time you say something negative to yourself or to a child, you need to say 3 positive things to make up for the effect. So think about that. If you're saying to yourself, oh, I should have done that better, or, somebody else could have done this, handle that situation. Now you're going to come up with 3 positive things to say to yourself. And if you don't do that, you're not going to feel better. You're going to just keep digging a hole for yourself or creating a super highway of negativity in your brain. So here's the other piece. When you feel that you are starting to ramp yourself up, or a kid is, try to be proactive. When you see, especially because your kids, you're with them all the time. It might be start putting in some time to do some guided imagery with kids, some meditation. One of the things that I think is really helpful is a quiet space that's not a punishment space. It's a space that has, soft pillows, it may have books, and it has a timer. Kids are allowed to go use that space as they need to, and they know to flip. An hourglass works really good. They flip the hourglass, they can have that much time. And catching kids before they ramp up too much, while it can be difficult, if you do that, it can help. For yourself, when you've had a very bad day, go home and take a nap. Give yourself a quiet space. If you like to cook, if you like to garden, do some of those things. I'm not going to tell you to take a bubble bath, but I know for me, sometimes a hot shower really helps unkink my muscles. So I will do that, not for relaxation as much as really trying to work out some of the physical sensations. So what are some of the things that we see that are going to increase resilience in kids and also for us? So positive parenting. I really don't like the phrase good parenting or bad parenting, because I think it's really judgmental. What I try to say is we want parenting that helps build up both the parents and the kids. And that goes for you as a parent. Family stress. So we're all under incredible amounts of stress. One of the things I can really recommend for you personally is to actually have a conversation about it. I think a lot of us don't talk about it at home. You know, we just go to work and we're stressed out, and we come home and we're snappy and we're tired, and we just don't sit down and say, boy, this is a tough period of time. And parental mental health, both for the kids and the families you work with, but for yourself. You know, this has been tough, and EAP exists for a reason. You know, I know it can be challenging to find the time to make for yourself, but what I pose to people is, if you don't make the time, where will you end up? So for individuals, for you, for the kids you work with, for your families, the things you want to look at trying to build up is the ability to emotionally regulate, the feeling of control, and ability to impact your own life. And I know right now that's hard because we don't know what's happening from day to day. But part of that is sort of the way I put it is, it's a psychological concept called locus of control. It can be external, outward, or internal, inward. So if you have a kid who did bad on a test and their response is, the teacher didn't like me, that's why I did badly, they feel like they had no control. It's an external thing. If they said, you know, I didn't study as hard as I could, I think I'm going to talk to my mom and see if she can help me figure out ways to do it, they're saying that they have the power to change an outcome, which also feeds into self-esteem, your ability to dream, of having a sense of purpose, increasing social skills, empathy, you know, feeling for others, a sense of humor. You know, if we don't laugh or make the effort to laugh, things will be that much more challenging and that much more difficult for us. A physical well-being. You know, I know none of us want to be told to go exercise, but even if it's just for a short walk, if you physically feel better, the rest of it will fall into place. So for communities, let's talk about what we can do for ourselves, what we can do for the kids with us. So supportive extended family. And that doesn't mean you have to meet with people face to face. Most of my family's in India. I spend a lot of time on FaceTime on my phone or Zoom on my computer talking to family, just so I can stay in touch. Finding a mentor who can support you. Positive school experiences, living in a safe neighborhood or close community. These are things that are larger picture things, but they're things to start thinking about. For some people, being part of a religious or faith community, and hobbies. You know, I don't care what your hobby is. It could be pouring sand. If it makes you happy, that's all that really matters. So making connections is really essential. What we want to do is make sure that we are socializing with peers. So kids should be doing that, but we should be doing that too. I think it's very easy to let friends slide because we're like, they'll be there and I've got so much going on. Even if you have to like actually schedule time to talk to friends, do it because it helps. Those mentoring relationships I spoke about, the stronger and more that you have and the stronger you build them, the better you feel. And then having family support. So, and here's my one caveat. I know for some of us, family is very fraught. It can be challenging. I am also the person who believes in found family, where sometimes you create family and that's what matters. But just knowing that you have that can really help. So these are coping skills that kids can use, but that you can use. And I'm going to be mixing this back and forth because the point I'm trying to get at is these things all build resilience, and they work for kids, but they work for adults. So encourage yourself to be independent. Do what you can do, but don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a difference between being independent and being bullheaded. Using suggestions, whether it's in school, with your partners, with your children, being responsive to the child's needs, being responsive to your own needs, being warm and emotionally supportive. And I know how hard that is right now when we're stressed. And you know, if you're warm and emotionally supportive to your coworkers, it goes a long way. So emotion-focused coping is really helpful for when you're starting to feel like you don't know what to do. So if you're in a difficult situation, and this is really hard for kids, working through what those emotions are and why they're happening is one of the best things you can do, is not trying to push down those feelings, but actually accepting them. And then, of course, you know, we've all worked on this mind, body calming, yoga, whatever else it may be. So for kids, you know, use the visual cues, teach that no emotion is bad, make sure you give them time to practice. And positive self-talk, listen for phrases, discover, reframe things for yourself. Here's one of the things that I think we get caught up in a negative spiral sometimes. So when you're in a situation that seems terrible, sometimes mentally taking a step back and trying to reframe it can really help. So mindfulness activities, I've talked about them. It can be teaching yourself self-calming, breathing, yoga, grounding yourself. So a couple things that you can do when you're feeling like you're about to fly apart. Start thinking about what are your internal body cues? What makes you feel bad or good or stressed? And start being aware. Like for me, my ears get hot. When I start getting really, really stressed, my earlobes get really, really warm. Breathing, you know, that's the one thing I can tell you more than anything else I think helps. I know it sounds really small and trite, but sometimes just controlling your breathing, because you'll find if you think about it, when you get upset or you get tense, your breathing speeds up. So if you slow it down, it actually calms you down. And increasing the flow of oxygen to your brain and getting the carbon dioxide out of your blood is helpful. Holding on to something tightly. I know that seems a little counterintuitive because you're trying to relax, but sometimes just holding on to something tightly feels good and keeps you from exploding. Stomping your feet, saying a mantra if you have one, you know, or a saying that you like, and then engaging one of your senses. So I'm a big believer in like smelling things or listening to things or tasting things. I love lavender. I find it calming. So it's one of the things that I use a lot of. So then the other thing I will tell you is you want to shake out your body. It's really, really helpful to swing your hands, shake out the tense part, crawl on the floor. If you're at home, who's going to say anything? But really that action of moving around is really, really helpful. If there's a person or an animal that calms you, or an environment or an object, whatever it might be. So what I'm going to say now is there are many things you can do to make yourself feel better. There are many things you can do to make yourself feel worse. One of the best things you can do is try to figure out a good routine for ending your day. So for example, for me, for my last 15 minutes before I leave work, I clean up my desk. I sort of review what I did this today to make sure I didn't forget something. And I start my to-do for the next list for the next day. And then I sit back and I close my eyes for a second and I just sit in my chair and breathe and say, okay, the day is over. I'm going to go to my car. It's going to be good. And I'm going to go home. Now, when I get home, I also have a routine. I walk in the door. I go right upstairs. I change out of work clothes. And if I'm working from home, I do dress in my work clothes just to mark the difference. So I'll still go upstairs. I change out of my work clothes. I come downstairs. I grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a book. And I give myself 10 minutes to just sort of breathe and relax and feel like my day is at an end. My entire family is trained. You leave me alone for 10 minutes. After that, you can ask me for anything you want, but I need to have those 10 minutes. And if I do that, I am a much healthier, happier person. And my family is much happier because I'm not insane. I get really wrapped up because a lot of my work involves interacting with people. And I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert. I need some me time to be able to do anything. The other piece I will tell you is many of us who work in this field are very, very bad at taking care of ourselves. We put ourselves last. We don't know how to say no. And we run ourselves completely ragged. And I know how challenging it is and how difficult it is because you don't want to disappoint people. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You need to disappoint people. And it's okay to do that sometimes because you can't be everything to everyone all the time. You need time to actually be able to exist and to breathe and to be a human being. And that's okay. I'm going to pull up one other thing because my screen did something funky here, sorry. So just bear with me. I don't know why it did this, but it just shut my PowerPoint down. So let's see what I can do here. Bear with me while I try to get to where we're supposed to be. Nope, that's the wrong one. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Just bear with me because my entire PowerPoint presentation just disappeared off of my computer, which is not super helpful. Here we go. So I want you to start thinking about what makes you feel stressed. And I'm going to go into some self-care strategies. Okay. Can you see my screen now? If someone could unmute and tell me.
No, Kheya, we aren't seeing anything.
This is so sorry about this, everyone. I love when computers do this. So let me do this. Share screen. Aha, there we go. Yes, share. All right, so I'm going to talk about things you can do when you're home because I know it's hard. We have a lot of competing demands, but I think you can find 10 minutes in your evening. So you can evaluate your day. You can write in a journal. You can call a friend to just chit chat. You can assess what you've done to take care of yourself. You can draw or color. You can listen to something soothing. And this is going to sound sort of counterintuitive, but you can surf the web and mindlessly scroll Instagram. The caveat I'm going to give you is that you are going to set an alarm for 10 minutes. You're going to use that 10 minutes to scroll, but at the end of the 10 minutes, you're going to get up because you're not going to stay there forever. If you come up with 30 minutes, you can get a massage, you can exercise, you can eat lunch with somebody, you can color, you can knit, you can work on a hobby, read something for fun. Spend time in nature if that makes you feel good, go shopping. I can tell you what I do, and people laugh at me ridiculously. But in order to shut my brain off at the end of the day, because it races a mile a minute, I will watch the most ridiculous, trashiest reality TV that you can imagine, because it makes me feel better. So know that sometimes that's what you got to do. Now, the one thing I think that happens a lot for people who work with children, especially whether you're a home daycare provider or even a center, is relationships are hard to nurture. We spend our entire days with kids. A lot of times we're isolated from other people our own age, have limited contact. And one of the best things you can do for yourself is build community. It prevents trauma, it builds resilience. So what can you do? If you have 2 minutes, I'm challenging you to find 2 minutes in your day. Leave a message or send an email to someone who's important to you and just let them know you're thinking about them. Make sure you say goodbye to people when you leave. Leave Post-it notes on the fridge with messages for your partner, for your child. You could do it at work for your fellow teachers. And tell someone maybe if you're having a rough day that you need to talk to them and make some time. So 5 minutes. Pick up the phone and call somebody or see them in person. Don't text. Don't do all the other things. Actually talk to someone and hear their voices. You could mail a card. You could send an e-card. You could give people in your life a quick update on what's going on with you. The other piece that we tend to do or assume is that everyone else has it so much worse than us that we shouldn't lay stuff on them. We want to make it easy. When we do that, we rob our friends and our family chances to be supportive of us. And also maybe a chance to do the same. Because sometimes if you call someone up and you just say, I need to vent and talk, and you do that for 10 minutes, and then you can say to them, do you need to vent and talk? And maybe they need that as much as you do. Look at pictures that make you happy. Send email or call a friend and tell them about something funny that happened. Try to actually schedule stuff. Look at your calendar, get with your friends, figure out how you can get together or coordinate something. So 10 minutes, play a game with your child, read to them, go for a walk with a friend or a family member, cook with family or friends, write a letter, or watch TV. If you have, I'm going to end this here because I can see that we're getting some questions, but I'm going to talk to you about my most important thing that you can do. That is to find a moment of joy. So the way this works is it takes you about a minute or two. I want you to find a quiet space, maybe at the end of your day, where you can sit down and close your eyes and think of something really small that makes you really happy. So for me, I wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. I don't know why I wake up that early, but I do. And I go down the stairs and I walk into my kitchen. And as I'm walking in, I can look up and I hear my coffee maker just finishing because my partner has set it up the night before with an automatic timer. And my coffee cup is sitting right out there in front, and it's a really big mug. And I pour coffee in it, and I pick the mug up, and I usually go sit on my porch until it gets too cold. but I sit down and I wrap my hands around that mug and I feel how warm it is. And I lean over and I feel steam coming on my face. And I smell the coffee and I take my first sip. And every single time I do this in the morning, the same thought passes through my head, which is, I don't know what human thought it would be a good idea to roast beans and grind beans and then pour hot water through them. But whoever they are, I'm really grateful for them and that they were alive. So just thinking about it makes me smile. And it takes a minute or two to come up with all those physical descriptions. But once you have it during the day, when you're feeling very stressed, you can actually close your eyes for a second, breathe in, and pull that memory to you. And you'll feel yourself smile, you'll feel your shoulders go down. And when you open your eyes, you'll feel more capable of dealing with what's in front of you. So find your moment of joy. Use it several times a day. The reason you want to do that is because, like I said earlier, your brains can be formed no matter what. And it's really easy to make a negative superhighway. The more times you do things that are positive, the more often you're going to get a huge positive superhighway that will help you feel more resilient, help you function better, and let you know that things are going to be okay. So I actually finished a little bit earlier than I was planning, but I know we have some questions. So I am going to turn this back over and see what questions we have.
Okay, we do have one question that came into the chat while you're presenting, and we can start here. But if folks are on and you have questions or comments, now would be the time to type them in. But this first question, I think when you were talking a little bit about positive self-talk, and so the question is, does negative self-talk include the sarcastic or kidding or ironic self-talk?
I can, actually. And I'm a hugely sarcastic person, but really honestly, when you're being sarcastic about yourself sometimes, you really are, you're putting yourself down, because you can say just kidding, or that was a joke, or whatever else. But in the long run, what that does is it's putting those words into the atmosphere, and you're telling yourself that you were not good at something or you did something badly, which makes it really, really challenging to make yourself feel good about what you're doing. So.
Great, thank you. We did have another question that came in. Folks will get a copy of the presentation as part of the follow-up materials. Someone was wondering if it would be okay to go ahead and post maybe photos of those 2-minute and 5-minute self-care slides to share.
Yeah. So, you know, just print them out and do that, because I'll tell you, and trust me, I am not the world's biggest brain. I'm sure there are many more 2-minute things. And that would be a great exercise to do in a staff meeting, is share 2-minute or 5-minute things that you have found or that you have thought of. Like for me, you know, a lot of times a 2-minute thing is just to go outside, no matter how cold it is, and run around, whether it's raining, snowing, whatever, because it just makes me happy. But for other people, you know, it could be anything from eating a cookie to, you know, just having a giggle with a friend really quickly. I think the thing that I really want all y'all to take away is resilience is something you build bit by bit. It's not this huge, sudden revelation that, okay, now I feel great, I'm gonna be resilient from here on out. It doesn't work that way. The way resilience really works is it's a matter of putting one foot in front of the other and doing the work. And it's really hard right now to do that work. And I'll be the first person to say it, because there are days that you are just tired. And I will say that it's okay to be tired too. You know, it's okay to allow yourself to be human and ask for the support. Reach out to your supervisors, reach out to your coworkers. You know, one of the things that really helps a lot, especially if you work, let's say, in a center setting, or even if you work in like a home daycare, but you have a couple of friends who are also working in that field, is to get together for some peer support. Sometimes, while supervision is helpful and our supervisors are wonderful, sometimes you just want to talk to a peer to problem solve, to figure out what's going on. And sometimes you just need to moan and complain. And here's what I will say. It's okay to moan and complain to a certain extent. One of the things I really recommend is if you're going to do like formal peer support, where you're going to plan to meet up like once a week or once a month, is set up your time. Everyone's allowed to complain for the first 10 minutes of the meeting. And after that, it stops. And then you start looking at what people are talking about and what are solutions or problems. You know, building resilience is about finding ways that you can bounce back and finding ways for the kids that you work with to bounce back. You know, one of the things that I know, and I think all of you know, is people will say a lot, kids are resilient. And that's true to a certain degree, but they're not nearly as resilient as people assume. So we need to do that work and model it and show it, because we also know kids are wonderful little spies. They see things that we don't want them to see us doing. So the more that you can model some of this stuff and just be very open and honest with the kids you work with and the people in your life, the more resilient you become. Because when you start hiding behind a screen and you start being very honest, people feel that and will respond to it.
So we did have a few more questions trickle in, kind of continuing on that self-talk piece. Question is, why are people, a little bit of brain science, why are people more likely to say some negative about themselves versus something positive? Where does that originate from?
So I think a lot of it, really honestly, is what we learn when we're growing up. A lot of it's very social conditioning of, you know, I don't know about you, but, you know, my mom would always say, you know, if you say you're good, you're bragging. Or if you're not better than anyone else. It's these messages, it's that social psychology piece of the messages that we get. So there's not a brain biology reason. There is a societal reason why we do that. We also internalize lots of things, whether it's media, what we see, what we hear, what we read. We have a structure that we live in that's really based on making white men happy. So for women, it can be really challenging because we've spent many, many years being seen as lesser, and that's sort of baked into our society. And it's something we're trying to dismantle. And for some men, it's the same thing. If you're not a certain type of like highly successful, highly driven, the ideal kind of go-getter, it's really challenging. So this self-talk that we have really comes from all those different influences, and it's a hard thing to break.
Thank you. We had one more question that came in. Can you speak a little bit more about community care versus self-care?
Yes. So part of self-care is living in a thriving, healthy, and happy community. And the only way to do that is to become an active citizen member, as I put it. You get out of your community what you put into your community. So making that effort to volunteer, to get to know your neighbors, to teach your children about connection. You know, it's interesting for me because I bring two very different lenses to this. You know, I was born in India and I grew up in both India and the United States. And in the United States, your community really is your family because we live in extended families, and we live, you know, my family house. When I go back on my father's side, my grandparents lived there. My parents had a room or two there. My aunt, my uncle, my cousins, we all lived in this one huge house. And we functioned as a community that supported each other. And it's not that we didn't have bumps, but it was that whole idea that, people have said over and over again, it takes a village. But the thing is, it takes a village for adults too. That's what we don't realize. We get focused on kids and we don't realize that we all need our own villages. And the only way to build that is to actually reach out and be active and involved. And community can be different things for different people. It can be your neighbors. It could be your found family. It could be you're a theater buff and you're always in plays and you have a whole group of people. That's your community because you like community theater. You might be a member of the LGBTQ community, and that's your community, and that's where you're going to focus on making connections. But part of that is reaching out and figuring out what community means to you, and then trying to pull it closer, because there is a very different definition depending on who you are and what you're looking for.
Great, thank you, Kheya. I don't see any other questions coming into just as I said that, the magic cue. Okay, here's one from Nancy. Today I listened to a presentation by Dr. Bruce Perry, and one of his points was that we need to build resilience. According to his work, children who have been in a traumatic environment, their cortex part of their brain is closed down. How can educators help to build resilience?
So a lot of this is in tomorrow's, but here's what I can tell you. Our brain is like a series of magic trees that connect. Those are the neurons. And our brain is constantly expanding and contracting as we use them. And neuron growth occurs across the lifespan, though it happens more heavily in children. So while things can close down when you're a child, they can also open up a lot faster. So it's things like modeling. It's things like creating safe, predictable, consistent environments. The same schedule day in and day out. For a lot of kids, what's really been violated is their trust in the world being good. So in order to rebuild that base so you can keep going further, you need to create an environment where they feel like they are safe, that they understand what the boundaries are, they understand what the rules are, but they also can feel supported within their own uniqueness, which is one reason why I'm such a huge fan of like quiet corners. Because for kids who have problems self-regulating, sometimes being allowed to remove themselves, not being punished, but saying, if you see a kid that's starting to get wound up and they love a certain toy or they love certain thing, let them take that thing, and I just ask them, do you need some time? Do you want to go sit in the quiet corner? If they say no, then you move on to the next thing. But for a lot of kids, they'll take that escape, especially if they're taking something they really love with them. But more than anything else, I think when we're looking at development, especially brain development, the more we do to model behaviors, but also teach behaviors. So I think for many times, we don't explicitly say, this is how you do something. So for kids who have been through trauma and may have missed certain developmental milestones or behind, like making friends, they may not realize when someone talks to you, you talk back. And when someone gives you something, you say thank you, or whatever kind of expression you want to use to show that you're recognizing someone as being kind to you. It's actually teaching those things step by step for some kids.
Great, thank you, Kheya.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now we'll transition to our panel. So I'm hoping our panelists will turn on their cameras so we can see their lovely faces. Here they come. I see Jackie, I see Tina. Drum roll, Katie. Awesome. Well, again, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our dynamic panel this evening. I'll just give a quick intro and then give folks a little time to talk more about their work. First with us tonight, we have Tina Andrews. Tina, you give a little wave. Tina serves as a classroom teacher with Early Education Services, which is the Head Start grantee in Brattleboro. She'll be speaking a little bit more about her own experiences as a teacher over the course of the last 18 months and what she's found to be helpful in terms of supporting her overall well-being. We're also joined by Katie, it's Catherine Harris, but Katie Harris. Katie, give a wave. There you are. Katie currently serves as a mental health consultant with the Rutland Head Start program, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about her observations over the last 18 months and some strategies that she's employed to support the workforce. And last but certainly not least, we have Jackie Goodall. Jackie, give a wave to all the virtual folks. There she is. Jackie serves as a Children's Integrated Services Early Childhood and Family Mental Health Clinician at the Howard Center. And I'm really excited to cue Jackie up to talk a little bit more about some of the strategies she's used with staff. And she's also got some great tips and advice in terms of engaging leadership and building a supportive work culture. So let me just switch screens to my questions here. So first question, if each of you could tell us a little bit about your role and your work and the impact COVID has had on the populations you work with, given your role. And I think first off, I'm going to kick it to Jackie.
Thanks, Renee, and thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here and talk about some of the work we've been doing. So I work with children experiencing social and emotional challenges and their entire caregiving team. And what I've been noticing is everyone is just struggling, from the families we serve to the folks who serve them. It's quite honestly just been a struggle doing this demanding work of taking care of our littles. And then it's just exacerbated by the pandemic in a much larger and pervasive way. So in my role as the assistant director of the Early Childhood and Family Mental Health Program in Burlington is I really support staff through clinical supervision. And at times I've supported Head Start teaching teams with reflective practice groups. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, in some later questions. But in supporting the caregivers and the nurturers in this human service field, I've noticed just this collective suffering, and we're experiencing compassion fatigue, vicarious impact, burnout at greater levels than ever, and being on the front lines, caring for young children, while many of us are still upside down and in limbo, coping with hypervigilance and the ongoing stress and loss this pandemic has caused. And so we've come to lose what fills us up and when we're off the clock, but also our joy in the work. And it continues to be hard to dig our way out when we're still really in this, and the stress of the pandemic is still here. So that's what I've been noticing, and I feel like it's something that I'm sure we can all relate to.
Thanks, Jackie. Katie, I'll kick it over to you next. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work and some of your observations?
Absolutely. Thank you, Renee. Although I feel like Jackie stole a lot of it. Yeah, so I am an early childhood clinician for the Rutland Mental Health County of Rutland. It's been a long Monday. So what that means is that I provide a lot of direct support for preschool kids and younger, as well as their families, with any sort of mental health needs, from anxiety, PTSD, behavioral struggles, parenting questions, preventative support, as well as doing direct consultation with our local Head Start, as well as occasionally other daycares that specifically ask for it, either to give suggestions to the teachers or as a team as a whole for a particular student. As for what I've been seeing is a lot of burnout. Unfortunately, as I think everybody before me has said, there is fewer and fewer teachers who are working right now for whatever reason because they're burnt out, or just because of the pandemic and various needs of taking care of their own families. But that leads to the people that are in the daycares handling more kids in their classroom that are now just oozing this trauma and this anxiety, and they're doing everything they can to try and keep themselves together, their families together, and their classrooms. And, you know, essentially at this point, it just feels like they're pouring from an empty cup. So, and I try my best to be there, if nothing else, than just someone who's not their boss to listen to, or that will listen to them.
Thanks, Katie. Tina, let's ground us a little bit. We've got a lot of direct service classroom teachers in the ground, and I'm sure can echo some of your experiences, but what's life been like for you as an early educator, just managing these times?
It's been really challenging and exciting in some ways too, to see the way everyone's kind of rallied together. I currently work as a preschool teacher, but until a couple months ago, I was working directly with children from 0 to 3, and that was my classroom. And what I've noticed about this population is that, you know, COVID was such a strange thing coming in, roaring in, and then all of a sudden there's these expectations among this population that values relationships, and you had to stop seeing people. And one of the things that I've noticed in my line of work is that many of our populations that we do serve didn't stop seeing people. And so there was an extra stress on the people who were providing care, because all of a sudden we're doing everything we can to safeguard your children, but it's not feeling reciprocated. And so I think in some ways that really contributed to some of the burnout that we've all kind of been seeing. Yeah, that's where I am, guys.
And still managing all of that, able to join us on a Monday evening. So thank you. So Tina, you, as an educator, you talked a little bit about this, so I'll flip back to maybe Jackie or Katie, whoever might want to queue up first. Can you talk a little bit in more detail about the educators that you work with or that you've come into contact with, and maybe some of the unique challenges that those folks have faced? I know we've talked a lot about the impact that this pandemic has had on children and on families, but I'm wondering if you can hone in a little bit more about how your role interacts with the educators in the field, and some particular points that we need to pay attention to when we're talking about the impact on educators. And Katie, I see you nodding enthusiastically, so I'm going to start with you this time, so Jackie can't steal it all from you.
Okay. I think the hardest thing right now is I'm seeing time and again the educators being exposed to this trauma that the kids are bringing in, and, you know, whether effectively or not so much, because they care so much for these kids, as I hope we all do, but these are little people that they just love dearly and they want to bring in and give that comfort. But then there's the danger of that vicarious trauma, because these kids have no boundaries. You know, they share everything in front of all of their peers and the people around them, and sometimes it's the most horrible thing you've ever heard. So, and this is what the educators are hearing every day, as I'm sure many of the people here listening have experienced. And, you know, how are they sort of helping to hold that and themselves together? I think it's becoming more and more difficult. I've been seeing the classroom teachers just slowly edging towards not always being the most, you know, patient, the most ability to manage frustration with kids. And it's completely understandable, you know, and where I can, I try and step in and maybe support them either by, you know, reminding them it's okay to step out or whatever they might need. But it's so hard for them to be juggling it all. And I think it's a big ask for them to be doing it by themselves sometimes.
And I think it's really hard for them to acknowledge that they're experiencing trauma on so many levels, because they need to be, they're supposed to be the strong ones, and they're supposed to hold it together and take care of the kids and take care of their families. And that stuffing down again and again and again will eventually explode. And I think that's one reason it's so important to me. And I think I do a lot more work tomorrow on really talking about trauma and what are the reactions that you might be undergoing, because we're not willing to be vulnerable right now either, because it doesn't feel very safe.
Katie, I wonder too if you might touch a little bit about the impact that you've seen, particularly on family child care providers. So I know that our audience today ranges in terms of their settings, but I know we've had conversations in the past about maybe some of the unique impacts that this has also had on family child care providers. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So as part of my role, I work in a community, so I am everywhere in my county, which even involves going into, in-home daycares, small private daycares where, a classroom has one person in it for all of the kids. And I think a lot of times everybody, us included, might be suggesting we'll just switch out with somebody. Well, you are the only one. So, and that's quickly burning people out, and I see frequently, and especially very recently, where there's the struggle of wanting to say, I need a break, but also seeing all of these families who are trying to work and juggle and having their kids out from school for a week because they're being quarantined and needing a place for their kids to be so that they can work and earn money. And how hard is it to say, well, no, I really can't because I need to have a doctor's appointment. So I make sure I take care of my health. I need a day for me. I need a day to celebrate my kid's birthday, or, how do we practice saying no? So sorry, I saw somebody.
No, that's
it's not
you're good.
Daycare, it's childcare. Thank you for correcting me. My brain sometimes still switches back to that. It absolutely is childcare, because it often does lead into much later into the evening, which is where good, strong boundaries, I think, are helpful. Maybe that's for a later discussion.
Well, I'm curious, Tina, if you want to hop in here and talk, as Katie was talking about, it can be challenging in the role with setting those boundaries and kind of the pressures that educators are facing, balancing their own needs with the needs of families and kids. Can you talk a little bit about your reflections to that?
Yeah, so I was just thinking that, as Katie had said, the trauma is just oozing right now from all areas. And I think that a lot of us educators are feeling frustrated, and we're feeling unprepared, and we feel like we're managing behaviors versus teaching classrooms, which can be really discouraging. And I think that's why a lot of teachers have kind of stepped back from this field, is because we're not being valued, even though they're saying like the economy can't run without childcare. Here we are, we're having these conversations and we're short staffed, and there's not enough, it doesn't feel like enough appreciation is going around. Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You're okay. I've got one to queue up for you too. We had a question that came in, Tina said she was also excited about some things she has seen. What are those?
So those might come in some of the other questions that we answer down the line, but one of the biggest things that I've seen come out is like this leveling of the field. So we're all kind of in this together. And so you have executive directors sitting in on meetings with the cooks and the teachers and the secretaries and all of everybody, and everybody's role is being recognized as being important and really necessary, you know, and I think that they sorry, I'm so anxious, guys. Woo. um so
Breathe. Remember to
I know.
breathe.
So I think that that's some of the excitement that I'm seeing, and just to see the attention that's been brought to the field by the pandemic and the professionalism and all of the stuff that's coming forward now is really exciting. And I know that my agency has implemented like a few new things, like navigating the unknown is one of the things that they started doing, where we could all get together and talk about what was going on and what we were experiencing and use each other as sounding boards. And so that's what I'm excited about. I feel like some of the silos have been broken down a little bit more, even in agencies. And that's really something to be excited about.
Great. Thank you, Tina. All right, our next question. What strategies have you used or seen used to effectively support the mental health needs and the overall well-being of educators? And Jackie, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So I guess in kind of thinking about burnout and just how insidious it can really be, the true sort of solution to the sort of vicarious impact that we can get as early childhood educators and caregivers is reflective practice. And when I say like it can be insidious, I mean that like sometimes when we're struggling, we may vent or complain or like feel hopeless alongside our coworkers. And we may try to fix our problems by going into that problem solving mode. And although we may not realize it, this can actually make us feel worse. And in addition to not feeling better, our own negative thoughts and feelings can get passed on to our coworkers. And it's kind of like a germ. We just kind of unintentionally, through letting off steam, can kind of spread this, like kind of Kheya was talking about. And so we really need a good framework for how to manage the emotions we experience and the compassion fatigue we experience. And we need to kind of get at the root of what we need, get at the root of what the challenge is and how we sit with it. So that system, that framework of doing reflective practice is really, it's evidence-based, and it's a process for mitigating the effects of vicarious impact. And I've seen it be really meaningful to people. And I got to start a group with Head Start in Chittenden County, where we met monthly with different teaching teams over Zoom, like right at the start of fall of 2020, where folks were kind of going back into the classroom. They were meeting via Zoom and very stressed out and overwhelmed with starting back up after a pretty long hiatus. And I have to say that although people started off with like some feelings of anxiety around that, because it takes some vulnerability to do the reflective work, that overall people express that they feel like really supported, and that overall have a way of managing kind of the strong emotions and sticky, difficult moments in the work. And, you know, it can be done in that kind of group setting. It can also be done in one-to-one supervision and even peer-to-peer, but that is something that when it's integrated into the whole system and it's consistent and valued and like what we say is like hold sacred, that it can have some really positive impacts for navigating the kind of bits of the work where there maybe isn't a solution, but just how do you like emotionally sit with something difficult. So I would say first and foremost, reflective practice is something that works. And I have some more, but I can kind of stop talking if you want to like circle back to me.
Sure. Tina, I think this is a really key time for you to jump in too and talk a little bit about how you've seen your program and your organization respond to meet the needs of the well-being of educators. What's worked for you? What's kept you sane and moving forward and continue to do this work?
So what's kept me sane, I think, was about 6 months ago, I took a leave of absence from work, a medical leave, and really took that time to focus on my own mental well-being, because I was noticing that I just wasn't my best self in the classroom. And I really, really needed to be giving more than what I had. And I ended up reaching out to our EAP and getting support through them. They hooked me up with some counseling services. They set me up. They got the ball rolling with the retreat, so I could finally go and get some mental health services from there. And that taking that leave was probably the best thing that I could have done. It really helped to reset my mind. And it was really difficult to step out of my classroom for 2 months and to trust that my position would be okay, and that when I came back, things would be okay. And I have to say, the first week back was just really amazing and really helped to clarify things for me and let me know that this is actually where I'm supposed to be and this was what I was supposed to do. So I'm trying to, just get the word out there a little bit more, because I think we have so much stigma around mental health anyways. But we have to be able to take care of ourselves before we can give to these little people. And so that's kind of the message that I'm hoping to spread.
Thanks, Tina. Katie, is there anything you would add about specific strategies you've seen kind of employed around your mental health your consultancy, either supporting teachers managing behaviors in the classroom, or things that, work that you're doing with staff and staff meetings, or what have you seen that's been successful?
Yeah, I think I try to do a lot of modeling, not just for the educators, but for the kids. And I think, within the past couple of years, I've really noticed that parallel process is a huge thing. If we want the kids to do something, we have to do it. And that includes self-care. If we want the kids to be willing to use that be by yourself space for 5 minutes, we have to be willing to say, you know what, I need a break, and taking 5 minutes. So, all of those good self-care things that we're talking about, we want the kids to be able to do, but we have to show them how. And that ends up helping us too. And that includes, catching yourself when you're saying something negative about yourself out loud. We don't really want the kids to be saying negative things. So just the gentle correction of like, oh, I'm not bad at that, I'm still practicing. It's usually my favorite go-to. So all of those things I think are really important. And sort of coupled with that is we want the kids to be able to develop healthy boundaries with people. And how do they learn how to do that? They learn by seeing how we do it as adults. And we might be the only people in their lives that are demonstrating that for them. So, it can feel like, I'm abandoning people, I'm abandoning these families, I'm abandoning the students that I'm working with. But ultimately, you're showing them how do you have healthy connections and interactions in a way that preserves your own mental health, as well as, still having that connection. So like Tina was saying, taking those 2 months off, that's demonstrating to her students that that's okay. And we need that sometimes. So, and that can be letting everybody know that, what, right now, I can only stay so long providing, being an educator. I can only do it for so long during the day, or, whatever that looks like for anybody here. I know for myself, when I was doing at home work, even though I wasn't traveling the hour to get to work, I still made sure that my day started and ended at the same time. So that was something I made sure I did. And that has been really helpful for getting back into the swing of things. So.
It's also that piece that we don't think about. We'll hear, like when you're on the airplane, always put your oxygen mask on first. it's that whole piece that put your mask on, because then you can take care of other people.
Yeah, and I love that piece, Katie, about like the modeling, right? Like maybe sometimes the educator just needs to be in the quiet corner reading books, right? You can supervise safely, but it's like sometimes let's go check out that cozy corner and snuggle up with a pillow. And I think, Kheya, to your earlier points too about the sensory things like drumming and music, like as where we might be employing those techniques to support the kids, but at the same time, it's also helping us calm down and take a breath and to meet our needs as well.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I sort of wove in kids when I was doing this, because I wanted people to realize that we use these with kids, we need to use them with ourselves too.
I love the crawling one.
Yep.
Right? They're crawling around on the floor with a bunch of kids. Yeah.
Oh gosh, with the pup, I got a new puppy. I know I was talking to a couple about that. He's 9 weeks old, and I have spent more time crawling on the floor this past week trying to find the puppy than I can tell you.
Jackie, you were going to hop in.
Oh yeah, I don't know if it's the moment's already passed, but just thinking about the modeling, like something I was thinking about was, and this is more for supervisors, but you know, nurturing the nurturer, right? Like the way we supervise our staff is a model for how staff are with children and their coworkers. And so it just comes on right down the line. Another kind of piece to that, if I could just add, is something like Renee and I talked about in the beginning is, and this is also sort of more of like a systems workplace, effective workplace sort of message, but that's also like capitalizing on joy and creating space for connections as best we can. Something lacking that we learned in our program during the hard months of COVID was the opportunity for connection and joy. It is so hard to do this work if you're not having fun and connecting with other people. And now that we're back together, you know, but there are pieces we need to reintegrate into our new normal, and we need to be intentional and creative about it. We need to allow ourselves to be silly and laugh, and figure out ways like our old practice can be kind of recreated into like the new normals, and doing things and traditions that make us happy. But I do stress it has to be co-created, right? Like it has to be everyone. It's not just leadership or like the team lead to do that. Like everyone has to be involved in that. Some things we do in our program are we do Star of the Day, which is like by Zoom, each staff member gets to have a share day and share pictures of like their family or a vacation they went on. And we do icebreakers routinely. We do personal check-ins. We even dressed up for Halloween this year, which we've never done in the past. And we buy food more than normal and ask staff for input more than we ever have. So we have to, we found that like, it's like, we even have like a director of morale at this point. It's a joke, but like, that's how much of an effort it kind of is right now.
Yeah, it's a full-time job paying attention to it, right? Like someone's got to be doing it. So we have had a few questions come in, and I think, Jackie, I'll start with you because I think this builds on what you were just saying about relationships. So are there any examples you want to share of families and providers building relationships during these times and working together to solve problems? And if it doesn't resonate with you, Jackie, then I might kick it to Tina.
Yeah, you know, I don't do as much like that direct service work. So maybe it's better for Tina or Katie.
Can you repeat that?
Are there any examples you want to share of families and providers building relationships during these times and working together to solve problems?
I don't know if this exactly answers it, but we had parent-teacher conferences today and 100% of our families showed up for the conferences. And that was really, really exciting. We hammered out 12 in 2 days. So, you know, I feel like parents and caregivers and society in general is starting to see that what we do is important work. And it's not just for anybody. I think that was clear, when we started kicking teaching back into the home. And so I feel like we're finally being valued, and that I can't even, the praise that my team got over the last 2 days from families that we were anxious to hear from just felt really good. And I'm hoping to carry that with me through the rest of this month as things get harder, throughout the month. But I feel like there's more of a value on the education now. People are valuing it more. And we really have this amazing opportunity to teach them.
That's great. And I'm just thinking, as Kheya's moment is that cup of coffee, right? Like, you'll be holding on to that moment of sitting in a parent-teacher conference and hearing all of that great feedback when it gets rough. We did have another question that came in. It says, as Jackie's talking about nurturing the nurturer, and Jackie, this isn't for you, but it was prompted by what you were saying. I'm wondering, who is nurturing our directors or the family child care providers who fill both roles? And Kheya, I might turn this one over to you, thinking about who's nurturing the nurturer.
Yeah, it's a tough question. That's one of the things I've been doing a lot of training around, actually, all through the state, about trauma-informed supervision and equitable supervision, and how do we take these principles that we have in the field of trauma and actually apply them to ourselves, to the people we supervise, to the people we live with. The people I worry about the most really are all y'all who do the tough work of doing home daycare. Not that center daycare is easy too, but I know the isolation, and I know how easy it is to feel unsupported. And one of the things, like I said, I can't tell you strongly enough that, working with people who are doing the same type of work, or even reaching out to, child care resource and referral specialists to talk about, if there's not a Zoom group right now, creating a Zoom group. Because I know at the end of the day, the last thing you want to do is put on your shoes and show up somewhere, So, but we've learned through there are silver linings in COVID. We have learned that we can use technology to our advantage. And I really urge all y'all who do this work to take advantage of it, because at least there's something really nice at the end of the day. Sometimes be able to sit back with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just chat with someone who understands what you're going through. Just that act of being seen is so important. And so that would be the thing I'm going to tell you is like I said, I worry about all y'all, and I worry about your directors. I think we all have some pretty empty cups these days. And the best we can do is really support each other. And if you're doing, one of the things I talk about when I talk about trauma-informed supervision, it's a two-way relationship, like any other relationship. And any time that I've been in the position where I've had to supervise people, I have learned more and probably gotten more from my supervisees than I think they got from me, because they're amazing human beings and they do tough work. And if you're doing it right, it's a give and take where you're both getting something from it.
Thank you, Kheya. So our last question for the evening, or prompt, so if folks do have other questions, now is the time to be entering them into the Q&A. My final question for you all tonight, we know that supporting educator well-being requires supportive organizational culture. What strategies can program leadership employ to help prioritize and support the well-being of educators? Or how can educators engage their leaders to ensure that their mental health needs are met? And Jackie, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, I think it starts with vulnerability, like seeking out reflective consultation from your leadership. Take some vulnerability. Ask for it to be a consistent practice you can count on. You may want to request mental health consultants to support you in learning more about it and have them support your team in doing these consultation groups monthly. I'm thinking more about the childcare providers at home, and this is sparking some thought about like, well, how do we do that for that really vulnerable group as well? Since they might not have as much access to consultants for that, but doesn't mean it can't happen. And I think just, again, with the vulnerability, I think you being honest and asking for what you need from your supervisors and leaders. It's a sign of strength, and leadership might not know unless you approach them directly. Talk about how you're feeling. And if you're experiencing things like burnout or compassion fatigue, it's very normal. Discuss a plan. It's people do come out of it, and you can get support to move forward and have the work be sustaining. So I would also just say too that, like, even though we are experiencing more stress and it's amplified by the virus, we have a lot more on our plates. We're balancing our lives in addition, but the answer is not like when COVID is over, but how do we find these sustainable practices now? Because this work has always been hard. It's just harder now. And how do we take what we learned from this experience, whether it's lower ratios, shorter days, things like that, and bridge them over into our new normal, and have those courageous conversations with leaders and state officials and people like Kheya to ensure that we're serving the whole person, the whole person teacher, the whole person child, and the whole family, and maybe making some changes in more big ways that really challenge the status quo from this experience of COVID.
Thanks, Jackie. Tina, what can educators do? What can leaders do? How do you ask, how do you talk to your leadership about your needs and try to get them met? Or on the flip side, what has your organization done to really make sure that it's incorporating these principles into its overall culture?
I think, like Jackie said, asking for what you need is so important. And if upper management doesn't know, then they can't address it. I hadn't really considered this question so much at the end, guys. So can I pass?
You can pass. Yes, you get to decide. We'll kick it over to Katie. Katie, anything that you would add, anything that you've seen in terms of how leadership within organizations are responding?
Yeah, I think I've been seeing some really cool things where agencies across the state have been trying to be more mindful of, educators need time off. They need time to connect. They need time to learn and clean their classrooms, other than, spritzing everything down and organizing it and making it look like they want it to. There was, a larger daycare that took all of their teachers out for a training day, but it was really a bonding day for everybody. And obviously not everybody can do that, but I think the message is there that, team leaders and, directors, they need to ask what their team needs, because the answers could surprise you. And it could just be, we need during staff meeting, enough time for all of us to potentially give one small complaint or one good thing that happened. I know for myself, my team always goes over funnies at the end of the week. And that always, is a great way to make us smile, remembering, how that one kid said the word wrong and it just made the context something completely different. So, and it's always funny. So I think, summing it up of, reflective practice, not everybody has it, even in bigger childcares, and making sure that you advocate for that. You need to have reflective supervision of some kind. I think it's really important for a lot of people to get it somehow. Peer support, peer connection in a way that is healthy and not always complaining, and because that gets into that toxic cycle. Yeah, and then reach out to designated agencies, because a lot of us, Rutland County, we do consultation for anybody that asks within reason. So, and I'm sure lots of other designated agencies do that as well. Just so you can get somebody that isn't your boss to come and, give ideas, or you can talk to and vent to.
Great. Thanks, Katie. The humor thing, that was definitely a theme with Kheya's presentation too.
Mhm.
Kheya, I'm going to ask you to close us out a little bit. What can educators do to encourage these conversations with leadership? What can leadership do to know that they're trying their best to meet their staff's mental health and well-being needs?
So when it comes to looking at this, one of the things that I always tell people is you are your best advocate. As hard as that might be, because no one knows you better than you. But there are things that you can ask for that are more than reasonable. For example, what is supervision? Okay, let's say you have an hour of supervision. Supervision should have 3 sort of tasks. So one's administrative, that's looking at what's going on in your classroom, policies, procedures, that kind of thing. The second part is educational, where you are building skills and learning from talking with your supervisor. And the third part should be supportive, where you're able to process things that have been happening. So if you look at an hour supervision, roughly you think 20 minutes on each, sometimes it can be more or less. But the ultimate goal of supervision is to help people be their best selves. So when you're asked, and when you put it that way to a supervisor, I think it's very hard for a supervisor to discount what you're trying to say, which is that you are looking to, improve. What we need to also remember, though, is what supervision is not. It's not therapy. It's not just a performance evaluation. And it's not just case management and organization and tick the box off when things are done. It's a mix of things, and you want it to be psychologically, emotionally, and physically safe. You want to feel that the relationship is trustworthy and there's transparency in your communication. Like I said, I can't advocate enough for peer support as part of supervision, because I think it's really important. Trying to work with your supervisor, I think one of the best things that I ever did was sort of sit down with them, and we sat down together and came up with what are our expectations, so we were on the same page. So I wasn't going to my supervisor saying, you're not doing this right, or anything like that, but I was sitting there saying, okay, what are we trying to do with this time? And this is what I need. So I was pretty clear. And the other thing is too, and it was really hard for me when I was younger, and I've only learned over time, but is to really advocate and make sure that issues, whether it's cultural, gender, sexual identity, whatever you're comfortable sharing, if they are affecting you at work or there's something going on where you feel not seen, is to bring that to the forefront. It's not that you have to share this. That's completely up to you. Your personal life is your personal life. But I finally, after years, finally spoke up when I had one to my supervisors saying, well, you're really good at your job. I just don't see your color. It doesn't matter. It just matters how well you do your job. And I'm like, something? It does matter. If you don't see that, you're not seeing 90% of who I am and what some of the interactions that might happen for me, or reactions that might happen with parents. And if I can't talk about them here in supervision, where am I going to talk about them? So it's that piece of being vulnerable, which is really hard. I'm not saying that anything I'm recommending is easy, but I think if you start as two human beings having a conversation about, this is what I need, because the ways to address vicarious trauma that you're all experiencing is awareness, balance, and connections. So it's being attuned to your own needs and limits and emotions, but it's maintaining a balance in your life, and your supervisor should be able to help you do that in your work life. I mean, when you think of it, for most of us, we spend more time at work than we do anything else. You know, especially if you look at the 5-day work week. So we need to figure out where that balance is. And we also want to feel connected to something larger. We want to feel part of something. That's being a human. So these are all things that if we can request and push into supervision, it will help deal with some of the trauma and some of the compassion fatigue that we feel.
Thank you, Kheya. We did have a couple comments that came in. So the conversation today at NECE with Dr. Bruce had a real impact. He emphasized we need to help children learn to regulate. Adults need to stay regulated in order to help the child regulate. So if any of y'all out there needed some pointed tips about why it's so important that you take care of you, right? Adults need to be regulating themselves in order to support the regulation of kiddos. And another comment, we need to help society realize the importance of early childhood education, all the more importance that we get involved in the work of power to the profession.
And I will say the other piece, I want to build on what Dr. Bruce said. It's also really important to be kind to ourselves and realize when we can't regulate and ask for help. Because sometimes you just can't and you've hit that wall. And rather than put yourself in a situation that feels unsafe to you or anyone else, you need to reach out and ask for that help. It's important. And it's okay to admit, I just can't in this moment.
Whew, that was a lot. I'm not seeing any other questions come into the chat. So I do want to take just one more time to thank all of our panelists and to thank Kheya for a wonderful presentation. I know we're looking forward to having you at tomorrow's workshop so we can continue building on this message and building on the strategies and what you have in your toolbox to help you be successful in this work. So thank you, Kheya. Thank you, Tina, Katie, and Jackie. It's been great. I'm going to turn it over to Anne to wrap things up for the evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this session. And just to let you know again that this is part of the annual conference for early childhood education in Vermont. I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors who support the work that we do. We do it every year. Vermont AEYC organizes this conference, and we do it in collaboration with our generous sponsors and partnership organizations. And here they all are. And one thing that I wanted to make sure you guys knew is that there's a program evaluation for the November program, and it is accessible by either using this link or through the QR code here, which you can use your phone, your smartphone, to click on it, and it will open up for you. Please take a few minutes now to provide your feedback to us. In the evaluation, you'll find an opportunity to be entered into a drawing to win an educational kit full of materials that were hand-selected for the November program. The tools and materials are designed for early childhood educators to use when supporting healthy social emotional development in young children. And I just wanted to point out a few of the items here. For example, there's one that's Let's Talk. I got a chance to look through it, and it's just a conversation prompter, but some of the conversations that, you know, that folks will find in here are going to be very helpful for this, to support that work. And the evaluation, all right, let's see. All right. One thing to know is that Ileana Zuniga is the Vermont rep for Lakeshore Learning, and she was so helpful in building this kit with me. I encourage you to reach out to her. We are putting a link in the chat now, which includes her contact information at Lakeshore Learning. And we're looking forward to tomorrow, where Kheya will be with us again for a workshop, either between 10 and noon or 6 and 8 p.m. The content will be the same for both workshops. If you're not already registered for one of the workshops, do so now. Allow at least 2 hours ahead so that UVM can send you your own link for the workshop. All of the conference sessions have been approved by Northern Lights at CCV to count towards annual training hours. You must complete a brief survey in order to have the training hours entered into your Bright Futures Information System account. If you would like to receive documentation and do not have a BFIS account, that's fine. Just go in and fill it out with the survey, and you will receive documentation. You'll notice that the link to the survey is now showing in the chat box. Also, tomorrow, a link will be posted towards the end of the workshops. When you click on the link, it will open in your browser behind your Zoom screen. There's just one link for both the plenary and the workshop. Be sure to indicate which sessions you attended. If you're attending a workshop tomorrow, you are also welcome to wait and complete the survey then and indicate that you attended both the plenary and the workshop. You must complete the survey within 24 hours after the November program is completed. The link will be available until Wednesday evening. Finally, I want to mention just how wonderful it is to be a member of Vermont AEYC. If you're a member now, thank you. We're making a difference for young children and their families in Vermont through all of the efforts that we're working on together. If you want to join, we welcome you. This is your professional association in Vermont for early childhood education. Again, here's the link to the program evaluation for the conference. It will be up for a little bit longer. One thing I wanted to mention too is this will also be sent to you in a post-session email, but the link for Northern Lights is only available here. So what I'll do is I will be turning the camera off in a few minutes, but I want to give you enough time to gather these two links, and particularly the one for Northern Lights, because you will not have an opportunity to get this again unless you go to the workshop tomorrow. So please make sure to get these links now. And so I will leave the camera on for a little bit longer. Please have a pleasant evening. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing with children and families, and for attending the conference.